My name is Marcus Chen, and I work as a transit system analyst for the Metropolitan Transportation Authority in New York City. For the past 7 years, I have been responsible for documenting subway operations, analyzing ridership patterns, and maintaining comprehensive records of all train lines, stations, and service schedules throughout the city. The job requires extensive knowledge of the transit network and regular field inspections to ensure that official maps and timetables accurately reflect actual service conditions. What I discovered on December 21st last year proved that some subway lines exist outside the normal operational framework and follow schedules that have nothing to do with standard transit authority oversight. The assignment that led me to this discovery was routine system verification during the winter holiday period when ridership patterns change significantly and additional service modifications are often implemented without proper documentation updates. My supervisor, Janet Morrison, asked me to conduct a comprehensive audit of all active subway lines during the Winter Solstice weekend to identify any discrepancies between published schedules and actual service operations. Marcus, she said during our Friday morning briefing, we have been receiving complaints about service inconsistencies on several lines, and corporate wants a complete verification of all routes before the holiday travel surge begins next week. Focus on the numbered lines first, then check the lettered routes for any unusual activity or schedule deviations. She handed me a folder containing official transit maps, current timetables, and a checklist of stations that required direct inspection during different times of day. The verification process involved visiting multiple stations, documenting train frequencies, checking platform signage for accuracy, and riding various lines to confirm that service matched published information. Janet emphasized that any discrepancies needed to be reported immediately, as the MTA was facing public criticism for schedule reliability issues that have been affecting commuter satisfaction ratings. I began the audit process on Saturday, December 20th, working systematically through the numbered subway lines during morning, afternoon, and evening periods to document service patterns and identify potential problems. The work was straightforward but time-consuming, requiring careful observation and detailed note-taking at each station I visited. Most lines were operating according to schedule with only minor delays that fell within acceptable parameters for weekend service. By 10 p.m. on Saturday, I had completed verification of lines 1 through 6 and was preparing to finish the weekend audit with a final check of the Times Square station complex, one of the busiest and most complicated interchange points in the entire subway system. Times Square serves multiple train lines and contains numerous platforms connected by a maze of corridors, stairways, and passageways that can confuse even experienced transit users. As I descended into the station complex, I noticed an unusual sign that I had never seen before despite having conducted dozens of inspections at this location over the years. The sign was mounted on a wall near the main entrance and displayed route information in the standard MTA format, but it referenced a train line that did not appear on any official transit map. Winter Solstice Special, the sign read, Line W operates December 21st only from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. serving stations throughout the extended metropolitan area. See platform maps for complete schedule and station list. Limited service, exact change required, no MetroCard accepted. The sign looked authentic with proper MTA formatting and typography, but Line W was not included in any transit authority documentation I had access to. There was no Winter Solstice Special listed in the official schedule databases, and a reference to exact change suggested fare collection methods that had not been used in the subway system for decades. Most puzzling was the mention of stations throughout the extended metropolitan area, which implied service beyond the normal boundaries of the New York City transit network. I photographed the sign and began searching for additional information about this mysterious Line W service. In the corridor leading to the numbered train platforms, I found several more signs providing detailed information about the Winter Solstice Special, including a route map that showed stations with names I did not recognize and locations that appeared to extend far beyond the normal boundaries of the subway system. The route map indicated that Line W served stations in areas like Shadowbrook Heights, Millerton Crossing, and Frost Valley Junction, none of which appeared on any MTA system map or corresponded to known locations in the New York metropolitan area. The stations were connected by a route that seemed to follow a completely different geographical pattern than existing subway lines, crossing rivers and terrain that would be impossible to navigate with conventional underground rail technology. Most significantly, the schedule information indicated that Line W operated only on December 21st each year, with trains running every 30 minutes throughout the night during a 6-hour service window. This was completely inconsistent with normal MTA operations, which do not include annual special services that operate only on specific calendar dates. No subway line had ever been documented that provided service just one day per year, and the operational complexity of such a schedule would be enormous for what appeared to be a very limited ridership opportunity. At 11 p.m. on December 20th, I positioned myself near the platform area indicated on the Line W route map to observe whether any actual train service would begin at the scheduled time. The platform was located in a section of the Times Square complex that I had not previously explored, accessible through a corridor that seemed older than the surrounding infrastructure and was marked with signs that used typography and design elements from earlier decades of MTA history. The platform itself was different from standard subway platforms in several ways. The walls were covered with tile work that appeared to be original early 20th century construction, but in better condition than similar historical elements elsewhere in the system. The lighting was provided by fixtures that looked like gas lamps converted to electricity, giving the entire area a vintage atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the modern LED systems used throughout the rest of the station complex. Most unusually, the platform contained no standard MTA amenities like benches, trash receptacles, or emergency communication devices. Instead, there were ornate wooden benches that looked like they belonged in a train station from the 1920s, along with brass fixtures and decorative elements that created the impression of stepping back in time to an earlier era of public transportation. At exactly 11 p.m. on December 21st, I heard the sound of an approaching train from the tunnel beyond the platform. The sound was different from modern subway trains, with a rhythmic mechanical noise that suggested older technology and possibly steam power rather than electric motors. As the train emerged from the tunnel and approached the platform, I could see that it was unlike any subway train currently in service with the MTA. The train consisted of 4 cars that appeared to be restored vintage equipment from the early days of the New York subway system. The cars were painted in a deep green color scheme with gold trim and brass fixtures that gleamed under the platform lighting. Each car had windows that were larger than modern subway cars, with ornate metalwork and decorative elements that suggested this was either carefully restored historical equipment or remarkably detailed reproductions of early 20th century train cars. The train came to a smooth stop at the platform, and the doors opened with a mechanical sound that was completely different from the electronic systems used on contemporary subway trains. A conductor emerged from the lead car, wearing a uniform that matched the vintage appearance of the train itself. The man looked to be in his 50s, with a precisely trimmed mustache and formal bearing that suggested decades of experience in railway operations. "Welcome aboard the Winter Solstice Special," he announced in a clear voice that carried easily across the platform. Line W service to all stations in the extended metropolitan area. Exact fare required, no transfers available, and all passengers must disembark at their intended destination as return service operates on a different schedule. Please have your fare ready and board quickly as we maintain a precise timetable tonight. I approached the conductor and showed him my MTA identification badge. "I am conducting a service audit for the Transit Authority," I explained. "Can you provide me with operational information about this line and confirm that it is authorized for service in the subway system?" The conductor examined my credentials carefully, then nodded with professional courtesy. "You are welcome to inspect our operations," he replied, "though I should inform you that Line W operates under historical service agreements that predate current MTA administrative structures. Our documentation and oversight procedures follow protocols that were established when this route was first created in 1904. If you choose to board for inspection purposes, the fare is 50 cents exact change. No bills accepted." The reference to 1904 and historical service agreements was puzzling, as the New York subway system had undergone numerous reorganizations and administrative changes since that time. No historical service agreements from 1904 should still be in effect, and there were no provisions in current MTA procedures for operating train lines under pre-existing agreements that bypass standard oversight requirements. But the conductor's professional demeanor and detailed knowledge suggested this was legitimate transit service rather than some kind of unauthorized operation. I paid the 50-cent fare using coins from my pocket and boarded the lead car of the Line W train. The interior was as impressive as the exterior, with authentic vintage fixtures, leather seats arranged in facing pairs, and brass details that had been polished to a brilliant shine. The car contained about 20 passengers, all dressed in clothing that seemed to reflect different historical periods, ranging from the early 1900s through the 1960s, as if they were attending a costume party or historical reenactment event. But their behavior was completely normal, with people reading newspapers, chatting quietly, and conducting themselves like typical subway passengers. As the train departed the Times Square platform, I began documenting everything I observed about the Line W service for my audit report. The train moved smoothly through tunnels that appeared to be different from standard subway infrastructure, with more spacious dimensions and construction techniques that looked older and more elaborate than typical underground rail systems. The tunnel walls were lined with decorative tile work and architectural details that suggested this route had been designed as a showcase for early subway technology rather than just functional transportation. The first station we reached was listed on the route map as Shadowbrook Heights, a name that did not correspond to any known location in New York City. The station platform was constructed in the same vintage style as the Times Square departure point, with period-appropriate fixtures and architectural details that created the impression of visiting a perfectly preserved historical site. About half a dozen passengers boarded at Shadowbrook Heights, all dressed in clothing from various historical periods and carrying personal items that matched their apparent time periods. A woman in a 1940s-style dress and hat carried a leather purse and wore gloves that looked authentic to that era. A man in a 1920s suit carried a pocket watch and wore shoes that appeared to be handmade in styles from that period. Most remarkably, these passengers seemed to represent different decades, spanning nearly a century of New York fashion and social history. As the train continued to the next station, I struck up conversations with several passengers to learn more about the Line W service and why people were using this unusual transportation option. An elderly woman wearing a 1950s-style coat explained that she had been riding Line W every December 21st for over 30 years, using it to visit family members in locations that were not accessible through regular transit services. It is the only way to reach certain places during the winter solstice, she said with a warm smile that suggested this was a cherished annual tradition. The regular subway lines do not serve all the communities that need transportation on this particular night, so Line W provides essential service for people who might otherwise be unable to travel to see their loved ones. A middle-aged man in a 1930s-style overcoat told me that he used Line W to commute to a job that was only available one day per year, working at facilities that operated exclusively during the winter solstice period. Many businesses and organizations have special needs during the longest night of the year, he explained in a matter-of-fact tone. Line W connects employees and customers to services that exist only on December 21st, creating economic opportunities that would not be possible with regular transportation options. It is quite efficient once you understand how the schedule works. The second station on the route was Millerton Crossing, which appeared to be located in a rural area despite being accessible through underground rail service from Manhattan. When the train doors opened, I could see that the station platform was surrounded by snow-covered trees and open fields that stretched into darkness beyond the range of the station lighting. The architecture was consistent with the vintage theme, but the setting was completely inconsistent with subway service in New York City, where underground stations are typically surrounded by dense urban development. Several passengers disembarked at Millerton Crossing, walking away from the platform into what appeared to be a small town with houses and shops that were lit by gas street lamps and decorated for Christmas in styles that reflected different historical periods. The scene looked like a collection of different time periods coexisting in the same geographical space, with Victorian-era buildings adjacent to 1920s commercial structures and 1950s residential architecture all functioning as part of the same community. As the train departed Millerton Crossing, I asked the conductor about the unusual locations served by Line W and how underground rail service could reach areas that appeared to be in rural settings far from New York City. He explained that Line W followed routes that existed in different spatial relationships than standard subway lines, connecting locations that were not necessarily adjacent in conventional geographical terms. The winter solstice creates unique conditions that allow transportation between places that exist in different temporal and spatial frameworks, he said with the professional calm of someone explaining routine operational procedures. Line W serves communities that are accessible only during the longest night of the year, when the boundaries between different types of existence become more permeable and travel between them becomes possible. Our service has been connecting these locations since 1904, when the route was first established to meet the transportation needs of people who live and work in multiple temporal frameworks. The conductor's explanation raised more questions than it answered, but his confident demeanor suggested that he was describing well-established operational realities rather than theoretical concepts. The idea that subway service could connect locations in different temporal frameworks was beyond anything covered in standard transit authority training. But the evidence of my direct experience suggested that Line W was indeed providing transportation services that operated outside normal spatial and temporal boundaries. The third station was Frost Valley Junction, where the platform was located in what appeared to be a mountainous area with snow-covered peaks visible in the distance. The station architecture remained consistent with the vintage subway theme, but the environmental setting was completely impossible given that we had started from underground in Manhattan and traveled for less than an hour. No subway technology could have transported us to a mountain location in that time frame. Yet the evidence of my senses indicated that we had indeed reached a high-altitude area with a completely different climate and terrain than New York City. At Frost Valley Junction, I observed something that fundamentally changed my understanding of what Line W represented. As passengers disembarked and walked away from the station platform, I could see that some of them appeared to be changing, becoming translucent or taking on different physical characteristics as they moved further from the train. A man who had appeared solid and normal while seated in the train car became increasingly ghost-like as he walked across the station platform, eventually disappearing entirely into the snowy landscape beyond the station lights. A woman who had seemed elderly during the train ride appeared to become younger as she departed, transforming into what looked like a teenage version of herself by the time she reached the edge of the platform area. Several passengers who had appeared to be wearing period costumes revealed themselves to be genuinely from different time periods, with clothing and personal items that were not reproductions but authentic artifacts from decades or centuries past. The realization that Line W was transporting passengers who existed in different temporal states and possibly connecting different periods of history through a single transportation system was both fascinating and terrifying. I was not simply riding an unusual subway line, but participating in some kind of interdimensional or time-traveling service that allowed people from different eras to travel together and visit locations that existed outside normal spatial and temporal boundaries. The implications were staggering, and I began to understand that my role as a transit system analyst had accidentally brought me into contact with transportation technology that operated according to principles completely beyond conventional understanding. The fourth station on the Line W route was listed as Temporal Junction, and as the train approached the platform, I could see that this location was fundamentally different from the previous stops. The station appeared to exist in multiple time periods simultaneously, with different sections of the platform showing architectural styles and environmental conditions from various decades. One end of the platform looked like a 1920s subway station with Art Deco fixtures and period-appropriate signage, while the middle section appeared to be from the 1950s with different tile work and lighting systems. The far end looked contemporary, matching current MTA design standards, but but somehow all three sections coexisted as part of the same platform space. As passengers disembarked at Temporal Junction, I watched them move toward different sections of the platform based on their apparent time periods of origin. The woman in 1940s clothing walked toward the section that matched her era, while passengers in more recent clothing gravitated toward the contemporary end of the platform. Most remarkably, I observed that the passengers seemed to become more solid and vivid as they approached the platform sections that matched their historical periods, as if they were returning to temporal environments where they naturally belonged. The conductor noticed my fascination with the station's unique characteristics and offered additional explanation about Line W operations. Temporal Junction serves as a hub where passengers can transfer between different chronological frameworks, he said while checking his vintage pocket watch. Some people need to visit multiple time periods during their Winter Solstice journey, whether for family reunions that span several decades or business obligations that exist in different temporal states. This station allows them to make connections efficiently without having to complete entire round trips on separate occasions. I asked the conductor about the operational mechanics that allowed subway service to function across different time periods and geographical locations that should be impossible to reach through underground rail transport. He explained that Line W was built during a period when the boundaries between different types of reality were more flexible, and the route took advantage of natural phenomena that occurred specifically during winter solstice conditions. The longest night of the year creates unique opportunities for transportation between places and times that are normally separated by barriers that cannot be crossed, he said with the confidence of someone describing well-established scientific principles. The subway tunnels were constructed to follow these natural pathways, allowing trains to travel along routes that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. It requires precise timing and specific equipment, but the technology has been reliable for over a century. As we departed Temporal Junction, the conductor informed me that the next station would be our final stop before beginning the return journey to Times Square. The destination was listed on the route map as Winter's End Station, and he explained that this location served passengers who needed to complete business that could only be conducted at the exact moment when the winter solstice reached its peak. Many important transactions and meetings are scheduled for the precise turning point between the longest night and the beginning of the return toward longer days, he said. Winter's End Station provides access to facilities and services that exist only during that specific temporal moment, when certain types of power and opportunity are at their maximum effectiveness. The approach to Winter's End Station revealed the most extraordinary location I had encountered during my Line W journey. The station platform was situated in what appeared to be a vast underground cathedral, with soaring arches and intricate stonework that created an atmosphere of ancient majesty and supernatural power. The architecture combined elements from different historical periods and cultures, creating a space that felt both timeless and impossible. Gothic arches supported ceilings that disappeared into darkness above, while Byzantine mosaics covered walls that incorporated Art Nouveau details and modernist sculptures. The lighting came from sources that I could not identify, creating a warm, golden illumination that seemed to emanate from the stonework itself, rather than from conventional fixtures. The platform was populated by figures who were clearly not ordinary subway passengers. These individuals wore robes, ceremonial garments, and formal attire that suggested they were participating in some kind of important ritual or official proceeding. Some carried staffs, scrolls, or ornate containers that appeared to contain significant items or documents. Others wore jewelry, crowns, or other regalia that indicated high rank or special status within whatever organization or society they represented. As I watched these figures move through Winter's End Station, I began to understand that I was observing some kind of gathering or meeting that brought together representatives from different time periods and possibly different realities for purposes that went far beyond ordinary transportation needs. This was not simply a subway station, but a neutral meeting ground where beings from various temporal and dimensional frameworks could interact safely during the specific conditions created by the winter solstice. The conductor gestured toward the ceremonial gathering taking place on the station platform. Tonight is the annual Winter Solstice Assembly, he explained, where representatives from different chronological periods meet to coordinate activities and share information that affects multiple timelines. The decisions made at this gathering influence events across decades and centuries, ensuring that changes in one time period do not create catastrophic disruptions in others. It is one of the most important functions served by the Line W transportation system. I asked permission to observe the assembly proceedings, and the conductor agreed, cautioning me to remain silent and avoid interfering with the formal business being conducted. He led me to an observation area where I could watch the ceremonies without disrupting the participants or drawing attention to my presence as an unauthorized observer from the contemporary time period. The Winter Solstice Assembly was conducted with formal protocols that suggested centuries of established tradition. The participants arranged themselves in a large circle on the station platform, with representatives from different time periods positioned according to chronological sequence. I could identify individuals who appeared to be from ancient civilizations, medieval periods, Renaissance eras, industrial ages, and contemporary times, all participating equally in discussions that were conducted in languages and communication methods that somehow allowed understanding across vast cultural and temporal differences. The assembly proceedings focused on reviewing significant events that had occurred during the previous year across multiple timelines and coordinating planned activities for the coming year to minimize conflicts and maximize beneficial outcomes for human civilization across all time periods. Representatives reported on technological developments, social changes, environmental conditions, and political situations in their respective eras, sharing information that allowed other time periods to prepare for or adjust to changes that might affect their own historical contexts. Most fascinating was the discussion of temporal maintenance activities designed to repair damage or disruptions that threaten the stability of the overall timeline structure. Some representatives reported on successful interventions that had prevented catastrophic events or corrected historical anomalies that could have created paradoxes or timeline collapses. Others requested assistance with challenges that required resources or knowledge from different time periods to resolve effectively. I realized that I was witnessing a coordinated effort by representatives from across human history to maintain the stability and continuity of civilization itself. The Line W transportation system was not just an unusual subway line, but a crucial infrastructure component that enabled this temporal maintenance network to function effectively. The winter solstice provided optimal conditions for interdimensional and intertemporal travel, making it the ideal time for representatives from different eras to meet and coordinate their civilization protection activities. During a break in the formal assembly proceedings, I was approached by a woman wearing elegant clothing that appeared to be from the late Victorian era. She introduced herself as Constance Wheeler, a coordinator for temporal maintenance activities in the northeastern United States during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. "You are the transit analyst who has been documenting Line W operations," she said with a warm smile that suggested she had been expecting our meeting. "Your reports have been noted by assembly members who are responsible for maintaining secrecy protocols around interdimensional transportation systems. We need to discuss your role in protecting this service from exposure that could compromise its essential functions." Constance explained that transit system analysts occasionally discovered evidence of temporal transportation networks, and that there were established procedures for bringing these individuals into the coordination system rather than attempting to suppress their knowledge or discredit their observations. The skills and expertise that made someone effective at documenting conventional transportation systems were also valuable for maintaining and improving interdimensional travel infrastructure. Your background in transit analysis makes you an ideal candidate for becoming a liaison between the conventional MTA system and the temporal transportation network, she said as we walked through the cathedral-like station space. The position would involve continuing your regular duties while also serving as a monitoring and maintenance specialist for Line W and similar services that operate in the New York metropolitan area. The work is challenging but essential for maintaining both transportation systems effectively. I asked about the scope of temporal transportation services beyond Line W and learned that there was an extensive network of interdimensional travel options operating throughout major metropolitan areas worldwide. Most of these services were disguised as conventional transportation systems or operated during specific temporal conditions that limited their visibility to ordinary travelers. The Winter Solstice was particularly important because it provided optimal conditions for the most complex and far-reaching temporal journeys. Constance provided me with orientation materials that explained the basic principles of temporal transportation technology and the organizational structure of the civilization maintenance network. The materials were presented as standard operating procedures, but they described concepts and capabilities that went far beyond anything covered in conventional transit system training. I learned about timeline stability monitoring, temporal paradox prevention protocols, and interdimensional coordination procedures that were essential for maintaining the complex network of time travel services. The assembly proceedings concluded with formal commitments from representatives of different time periods to support specific projects and initiatives during the coming year. These included infrastructure improvements to temporal transportation systems, expanded monitoring of timeline stability indicators, and coordination of historical intervention activities designed to prevent or mitigate catastrophic events across multiple eras. As the assembly participants prepare to depart through various temporal transportation methods, Constance handed me identification credentials that would provide access to Line W and related services throughout the year. She also gave me communication equipment that would allow me to maintain contact with temporal coordination specialists and report any issues or anomalies I observed during my regular transit system work. Your first assignment will be to conduct a comprehensive audit of all temporal transportation services operating in the New York area, she said as we walked back toward the Line W train. This includes not only Line W, but several other interdimensional travel options that operate under different schedule and access conditions. Some provide daily service during specific hours, while others operate only during particular astronomical or seasonal events. All require monitoring and maintenance to ensure they continue functioning safely and efficiently. The return journey to Times Square provided an opportunity to process everything I had learned about the temporal transportation network and my new role as a liaison between conventional and interdimensional transit systems. The train followed the same route in reverse, stopping at Frost Valley Junction, Millerton Crossing, and Shadowbrook Heights to collect passengers who were completing their Winter Solstice travel plans. The return passengers were different from those I had observed during the outbound journey, including individuals who appear to be returning from business meetings, family gatherings, or other activities that had taken place in different time periods or dimensional frameworks. Some carried packages, documents, or other items that they had obtained during their temporal travels, while others showed signs of having participated in significant events or ceremonies that had taken place at their destinations. By the time we returned to Times Square at 4:30 a.m. on December 22nd, I had begun to understand that my career as a transit system analyst had evolved into something much more complex and important than routine subway documentation. I was now responsible for maintaining two completely different transportation networks that served overlapping but distinct populations with very different travel needs and operational requirements. The conventional MTA system provided daily transportation for millions of ordinary commuters and travelers, while the temporal network served a smaller but crucial population of individuals who needed to travel between different time periods and dimensional frameworks for purposes that were essential to maintaining the stability of human civilization across multiple timelines. Over the following weeks, I began implementing my new responsibilities as a liaison between conventional and temporal transportation systems. This involved completing my original audit assignment for Janet Morrison, while also conducting assessments of interdimensional travel services that operated throughout the New York metropolitan area. I discovered that there were temporal bus routes, interdimensional ferry services, and even time-traveling taxi services that operated under various cover stories and scheduling arrangements. My reports to the MTA documented only conventional transportation findings, while my reports to the Temporal Coordination Network covered the interdimensional services that required ongoing monitoring and maintenance. The dual reporting system was complex, but it allowed both transportation networks to function effectively without compromising the secrecy requirements that protected temporal travel services from public exposure. The most challenging aspect of my new role was learning to identify and interact with temporal travelers who used conventional transportation systems for portions of their interdimensional journeys. Many people who appeared to be ordinary subway passengers were actually completing complex travel itineraries that included stops in different time periods or dimensional frameworks. Recognizing these travelers and ensuring they received appropriate assistance required skills and knowledge that went far beyond standard customer service training. I also learned that some conventional MTA employees were aware of the temporal transportation network and serve as informal liaisons who helped interdimensional travelers navigate the regular subway system when necessary. These employees have been carefully selected and trained to provide discreet assistance without drawing attention to the unusual nature of some passengers' travel needs. The coordination between conventional and temporal transportation systems was more extensive than I had initially realized. 6 months after my first Line W journey, I have become an experienced interdimensional transit specialist while continuing to perform my regular duties as an MTA system analyst. The work is demanding because it requires maintaining expertise in 2 completely different types of transportation technology and serving 2 distinct populations of travelers who have very different expectations and requirements. But it is also rewarding because I understand that my work contributes to maintaining the stability of human civilization across multiple time periods and dimensional frameworks. The temporal transportation network represents one of humanity's most important achievements, allowing coordination and cooperation across vast spans of time and space that would otherwise be impossible. By maintaining these services and protecting them from exposure or disruption, temporal transit specialists like myself help ensure that human civilization continues to develop and thrive despite the challenges and threats that exist across different timelines and realities. My name is Marcus Chen, and I work as both a conventional transit system analyst and an interdimensional transportation specialist in New York City. The job posting never mentioned that some subway lines operate outside normal space and time, but it has become the most important work of my life. The Line W Winter Solstice Special continues to provide annual service connecting different time periods and dimensional frameworks, and I am proud to be part of the network of specialists who maintain this essential service for travelers whose journeys extend far beyond the boundaries of conventional geography and chronology. Every December 21st, I ride Line W to participate in the Winter Solstice Assembly and coordinate temporal transportation activities for the coming year. The vintage train carries passengers across impossible distances and through time itself, connecting people and places that exist in different eras and realities, but share the common goal of maintaining human civilization stability and prosperity across the infinite complexity of the multiverse. Sometimes the most important transportation systems are the ones that most people never know exist, maintained by specialists who understand that some journeys are too important to be limited by the boundaries of ordinary space and time.